You may think you are confused because you have lost your direction. You may believe the problem is that you no longer know what you want, cannot summon the motivation you once had, or keep changing your mind about the life you are supposed to build. But the deeper possibility is more unsettling. You may not be lost at all. You may be receiving information from a part of yourself that no longer agrees with the future your conscious mind has been defending. Carl Jung spent decades studying this conflict between the life a person plans and the life the psyche quietly demands. He understood that the unconscious does not usually announce a new chapter with certainty, clarity, or a clean instruction. It interrupts. It removes energy. It changes the emotional meaning of familiar things. It sends dreams, attractions, resistance, grief, boredom, and strange moments of recognition. What feels like instability may be the beginning of a psychological correction. The trouble is that you have been trained to treat every inner disturbance as a problem to solve. When enthusiasm fades, you push harder. When a relationship feels different, you search for a technique to restore the old feeling. When solitude starts calling you, you accuse yourself of withdrawing. When an image, place, or possibility begins haunting you, you dismiss it as fantasy. You keep trying to repair the chapter that is ending because you do not yet trust the language in which the next chapter speaks. Your unconscious rarely tells you what is coming in a form your rational mind would approve. It does not hand you a 5-year plan. It speaks through changes in psychic energy. Something that once carried meaning becomes heavy. Something you cannot logically justify begins to glow. A dream repeats. A resentment intensifies. A forgotten part of you returns with uncomfortable force. These are not commands, and they are not proof that every impulse should be obeyed. They are signals that the arrangement between your conscious identity and your deeper life is changing. Jung called the larger movement towards psychological wholeness individuation. Individuation is not self-improvement in the ordinary sense. It is not becoming more efficient, more admired, or more consistent with the image you have built. It is the difficult process by which the personality becomes less divided against itself. The unconscious brings forward what the conscious attitude has neglected, exaggerated, or refused. It compensates for one-sidedness. It introduces the missing opposite. It disrupts the version of you that has become too narrow to contain your life. This is why the beginning of a new chapter can feel like decline. Your conscious mind measures progress by continuity. It wants more of what has worked before. The unconscious measures development by truth. It may withdraw energy from a role that once protected you, but now imprisons you. It may disturb a relationship that depends on your silence. It may make success feel empty, when success has become a substitute for being known. From the outside, nothing may appear wrong. Inside, the old structure has stopped receiving your full participation. A person sits at the edge of the bed before work, phone already in hand, scrolling without seeing anything. The job is secure, the colleagues are kind, and the salary is exactly what was once wanted. Still, the body does not move. A shirt remains on the chair. The person whispers, "I should be grateful," then reaches for the phone again, as if another 10 minutes might restore the missing desire. The danger is not that you will fail to decode every signal correctly. The danger is that you will silence the signals so completely that your life must become more extreme to get your attention. What begins as boredom can become exhaustion. What begins as a recurring dream can become a pattern of self-sabotage. What begins as a quiet longing can harden into bitterness toward everyone who seems freer than you. The unconscious does not punish you for refusing it, but neglected truth tends to return in distorted forms. You are not being asked to romanticize every mood. Depression, anxiety, trauma, and exhaustion deserve serious care, and psychological interpretation does not replace professional support. But you are being asked to consider that some of your distress may contain meaning. A symptom can be painful and still carry information. A collapse in motivation can be disabling and still reveal that your conscious direction has become disconnected from your deeper values. The task is not to glorify suffering. The task is to listen closely enough that suffering does not have to remain your only messenger. The next chapter usually appears first as a disturbance in the current one. Its early signs are subtle because the psyche is testing whether you are willing to notice before it is forced to shout. Your old ambitions have begun to feel strangely lifeless. You may still want the outcome in theory. You may still admire the status, security, recognition, or identity attached to it. Yet the emotional current has weakened. You can perform the necessary actions, but they no longer carry the same inner charge. The goal remains visible, while the meaning drains out of it. This is one of the clearest ways the unconscious reveals that a chapter has completed its psychological function. Jung observed that psychic energy does not disappear without consequence. It moves. When a conscious aim no longer serves the development of the whole personality, libido, in Jung's broader psychological sense, may withdraw from it. This withdrawal can feel like laziness because your ego expects the old source of motivation to remain available. But the psyche is not a machine obligated to fuel every identity you choose. It invests where life is trying to emerge, and it divests from forms that have become exhausted. A woman opens a presentation she has delivered many times. Her name is on the title slide. The promotion she worked toward is finally within reach. She corrects one line, closes the laptop, then walks to the kitchen without knowing why. On the counter sits a small notebook filled with sketches she has never shown anyone. Her hand rests on it longer than necessary before she returns to the presentation. The important detail is not that she should abandon her career and become an artist. The unconscious is not issuing a simplistic career command. It is revealing a shift in psychic value. The neglected creative life now carries more energy than the role that once organized her identity. The next chapter may involve art, or it may involve bringing imagination, authorship, and emotional risk into a life that has become almost entirely performative. When your ambition loses its pulse, your immediate instinct is often to shame yourself back into motion. You compare yourself to the person you were when the goal was alive. You interpret reduced energy as moral failure. You create stricter schedules, louder affirmations, and harsher consequences. Sometimes discipline is necessary, but discipline cannot permanently revive a meaning that has died. It can only keep the body moving after the soul has left the room. What you are calling a lack of drive may be the psyche refusing to spend another year financing an identity whose purpose has already been fulfilled. Your dreams keep returning to the same emotional territory. The images may change, but the feeling remains. You are late and cannot find the room. You discover a hidden floor in a familiar house. You miss a train, lose a bag, enter dark water, meet a child, stand before a locked door, or return to a place you have not visited in years. The dream does not explain itself. It leaves you with an atmosphere that follows you into the morning, as if some inner event has already occurred, and your waking mind is the last to know. Jung treated dreams as spontaneous productions of the unconscious, not coded fortune-telling, and not meaningless noise. He saw them as compensatory. A dream may correct the imbalance of your conscious attitude by presenting what you refuse to feel, what you fail to see, or what has not yet found a place in your waking identity. Repetition matters, because the psyche repeats what consciousness has not metabolized. A man dreams for several weeks that he is standing in his childhood home while water rises beneath the floorboards. Each time, he tries to save the furniture. Each morning, he wakes before the water reaches his knees. During the day, he answers his father's calls with the same careful voice, agrees to plans he does not want, and deletes a message in which he had begun to write, "I cannot keep doing this." The dream does not need a fixed universal meaning. Water can suggest emotion, the unconscious, dissolution, or renewal. But symbols become psychologically useful only when connected to the dreamer's life. In this case, the rising water mirrors what the waking personality keeps below the floor. The furniture represents the arrangement he is trying to preserve. The childhood home reveals that the pattern is older than the current conflict. His next chapter may begin with a boundary, but beneath that boundary lies a deeper change, the end of being the child who maintains peace by disappearing. A recurring dream often appears when your waking life has become too skilled at avoidance. During the day, you can rationalize. You can explain why now is not the right time. You can call your fear responsibility and your self-erasure loyalty. At night, the psyche removes your preferred language and returns you to image, sensation, and emotional truth. You do not need to force an interpretation. You need to notice what the dream makes impossible to ignore. Where are you trapped? What are you carrying? What keeps approaching? Which room have you not entered? What feeling survives every change of scenery? The answer may not tell you what to do, but it often reveals what your current chapter can no longer contain. What keeps visiting you in dreams may be the unlived part of your life refusing to remain homeless inside you. You feel an unexpected attraction to something that does not fit your established identity. A subject, place, kind of person, creative form, way of living, or forgotten interest begins to pull at you. The attraction may seem impractical. It may even embarrass you. You do not understand why you keep reading about it, imagining it, or feeling strangely moved when it appears. Your rational mind asks for a justification. The unconscious answers with fascination. Jung understood fascination as one of the ways an unconscious content acquires emotional charge. You are not drawn only to objects. You are drawn to parts of yourself reflected through objects. A distant landscape may constellate freedom. A certain kind of work may constellate authority. A person who unsettles you may carry qualities your persona has excluded. What grips you often contains projected fragments of your own unlived potential. A woman who has built her life around reliability begins watching videos of people restoring old houses. She has no construction experience and no intention of moving. Still, she pauses whenever someone removes a false wall and reveals original stone beneath it. One evening, she closes the video and looks around her immaculate apartment. For the first time, the room feels less like a home than a display of how little disorder she has allowed herself. The literal image is restoration, but the psychological image is revelation. Something original survives beneath what was added for approval, convenience, or protection. Her fascination is not necessarily telling her to buy a ruined house. It may be telling her that she is ready to recover an older structure of value beneath the personality she renovated for acceptance. This is where projection must be handled carefully. The thing that fascinates you is not automatically your destiny. The person who carries your unlived boldness is not necessarily your ideal partner. The city that represents freedom will not save you from the inner authority you carry with you. Projection becomes useful when you ask what quality has been placed outside you. The question is not only, why do I want this? It is also, what part of me becomes visible in its presence? The next chapter often arrives disguised as an attraction, because desire can approach places where duty would be refused. Your conscious identity may never permit you to say, I need a more creative life, but it will allow you to become obsessed with someone else's studio. You may never admit, I want to speak with authority, but you will watch interviews with people who refuse to apologize. Fascination gives the exiled quality a temporary body. What you cannot stop looking toward may be showing you the quality your next chapter requires you to reclaim from projection. Your tolerance for certain relationships and roles has suddenly decreased. Conversations that once seemed normal now leave you depleted. Jokes you used to overlook feel sharp. Requests you automatically accepted begin to produce anger before you have even answered. You notice how often you become smaller, quieter, more agreeable, or more useful in order to preserve connection. The relationship may not have changed. Your capacity to remain unconscious inside it has. Jung's concept of the persona explains part of this shift. The persona is the social face that allows you to function in the world. It is necessary, but it becomes dangerous when you mistake it for the whole personality. A role such as caretaker, achiever, peacemaker, rational one, strong one, or easygoing one may have earned love and safety. Over time, the role can become a contract you never consciously signed. Everyone receives the version of you they depend on, while the disowned opposite accumulates in the shadow. A man sits across from a friend who speaks for 20 minutes without asking a question. He smiles at the expected moments and reaches for his coffee after it has gone cold. When the friend finally says, "You are always so easy to talk to," his jaw tightens. He goes home, leaves his coat on, and stands in the hallway feeling angry at a compliment he once would have cherished. The anger is not proof that the friend is cruel. It is evidence that the role has become unbearable. He has been rewarded for being available without being visible. The compliment names the very adaptation his psyche is trying to outgrow. His next chapter may require a different relationship, but more fundamentally, it requires the end of one-sided participation. This stage can feel morally dangerous because boundaries disturb the systems built around your lack of them. People may call you distant when you stop over-explaining. They may call you selfish when you no longer volunteer for the burden they quietly assigned you. They may say you have changed, and they will be correct. Individuation changes the terms under which you relate because it reduces the amount of self-betrayal available for social harmony. Your reduced tolerance does not give you permission to become cruel. Shadow integration is not acting out every resentment. It is taking responsibility for the truth inside the resentment before it turns poisonous. You may need to speak directly, grieve honestly, renegotiate a role, or accept that some relationships were attached more strongly to your function than to your full humanity. What feels like sudden intolerance may be the part of you that has finally calculated the cost of belonging through self-erasure. You keep encountering grief that has no obvious object. The grief may rise in ordinary moments. A song plays in a shop. Evening light falls across a room. You see someone living with a freedom you cannot explain, and your chest tightens. Nothing has happened, yet something in you feels lost. You search for a cause, but the emotion seems larger than the moment that awakened it. Jung recognized that psychological development requires mourning. Every new form of life demands the death of an old identification. You do not only grieve people and events, You grieve unlived possibilities, expired identities, protections you no longer need, and futures you remained loyal to long after they ceased to be yours. The unconscious may reveal the next chapter by making you feel the ending before you can name what is ending. A woman hears her younger colleagues making plans after work. She declines, as she usually does, then sits alone in her car with both hands on the steering wheel. She is not lonely in the simple sense. She is grieving the decade in which being indispensable kept her from discovering who she was without being needed. The tears come quietly, not for one missed evening, but for a life organized around usefulness. This grief can be confusing because your current life may contain many good things. Gratitude and grief can exist together. You can love the people around you and mourn the self you abandoned to remain close to them. You can appreciate the security you built and grieve the risks you refused. You can honor the old chapter and still know that continuing it would become a form of dishonesty. The ego tries to convert grief into a problem because grief cannot be controlled through competence. It asks what action will make the feeling stop. But some grief is not asking to be stopped. It is asking to complete the emotional ending that your practical life has postponed. Until the loss is felt, the new chapter remains psychologically crowded by the old one. The strange sadness that finds you without explanation may be your psyche holding a funeral for the person you can no longer afford to be. These signs do not arrive separately in a neat sequence. They gather around one another. The old ambition loses energy. The dream repeats. A new fascination appears. Relationships begin to chafe. Grief rises from nowhere. Together, they create a pattern that your conscious mind can continue denying only by becoming increasingly divided. The most uncomfortable truth is that recognizing the next chapter does not free you from the cost of entering it. You may imagine that clarity will remove conflict. It usually does not. Real clarity often intensifies conflict because you can no longer pretend not to know. Once you recognize that a role is draining your life, continuing it becomes more painful. Once you see the boundary, every false yes becomes audible. Once you admit what fascinates you, your excuses become less convincing. The unconscious does not merely reveal possibility. It exposes the price of remaining unchanged. That price is not always dramatic. It is often paid in small daily betrayals. You laugh when you want to object. You delay the work that matters and complete the work that keeps you acceptable. You call someone back because their disappointment feels more dangerous than your resentment. You stay busy enough to avoid the grief that might reorganize your life. Each act appears minor, but together they form a loyalty to the old chapter. The shadow beneath the shadow is that part of you may prefer suffering you understand to freedom you cannot control. The familiar identity gives you a place in other people's minds. It tells you who you are allowed to be. Even your pain may carry status, innocence, or belonging. If you are always the responsible one, you never have to risk being seen as uncertain. If you are always the wounded one, you never have to risk discovering your power. If you are always the helper, you never have to face the terror of having needs no one is obligated to meet. Jung knew that individuation isolates before it connects more deeply, not necessarily through physical solitude, but through the recognition that no one else can authorize your inner life. Advice can help. Therapy can help. Community can help. But no relationship can make the central choice for you, whether you will continue organizing your life around the protection of an outdated identity. This is why the next chapter may threaten people who love you. They know how to relate to the person you have been. Your change introduces uncertainty into the emotional system. A partner may fear losing closeness. A parent may experience your independence as rejection. A friend may interpret your boundaries as judgment. Their reactions do not automatically mean you are right, but neither do their reactions prove you are wrong. Growth must be examined ethically, yet it cannot be submitted entirely to the comfort of those invested in your previous form. You may lose approval. You may lose predictability. You may lose the flattering story that everything happened to you and nothing was chosen by you. You may have to admit that some doors remained closed because you kept your hand on the handle from the inside. This admission is painful because it ends the innocence of unconsciousness. It also returns agency. The next chapter will ask for something specific, a conversation you have rehearsed but never begun, a role you must stop performing, a talent you must practice badly before it becomes real, a grief you must feel without using productivity to outrun it, a period of uncertainty in which the old identity no longer fits and the new one has not yet formed. No symbol, dream, or insight can remove this threshold. You are not being asked to destroy your life in the name of authenticity. Sudden action can be another form of avoidance. The unconscious asks for relationship, not obedience. You must test what you feel against reality, responsibility, consequence, and time. But caution becomes self-betrayal when it is used indefinitely to protect a life you already know is false. The choice is not between fear and fearlessness. The choice is between the fear that accompanies becoming and the fear that accompanies slow disappearance. You are allowed to stop demanding complete certainty before you honor what you know. You are allowed to admit that a goal has ended without calling the years you gave it a waste. It may have built capacities you still need. It may have carried you through a stage that could not be skipped. Completion does not invalidate devotion. It reveals that devotion has done its work. You are allowed to take your dreams seriously without turning them into prophecy. You can sit beside an image, record it, feel its atmosphere, and let its meaning unfold. You do not need to force the unconscious into a slogan. Respect is slower than interpretation. You are allowed to notice fascination without immediately reorganizing your life around it. Let the attraction show you what quality is missing. Let it reveal the courage, play, authority, tenderness, risk, or solitude your established identity has excluded. Reclaim the quality before worshiping the object that carries it. You are allowed to disappoint the version of others that depends on your self-abandonment. This does not mean you stop caring. It means care can no longer require your disappearance. The relationships capable of meeting you more fully may need time to adjust. The relationships built only around your function may not survive. That grief is real, but so is the grief of remaining loved for a mask. You are allowed to mourn without rushing to become someone new. The space between chapters is not empty. It is where psychic energy detaches from an old form before it finds a new one. Jung understood that transformation often requires a descent into uncertainty, because the ego cannot manufacture the symbol that will reorganize the personality. Something new must be allowed to emerge rather than being copied from the past. You do not need to prove that your next chapter is impressive. It may be quieter. It may contain less status and more life. It may look like a boundary rather than a breakthrough, a room of your own rather than public recognition, a smaller circle rather than broader approval, a return to something simple that your ambitious self once dismissed. The confusion you began with may not be evidence that you have lost your direction. It may be the feeling of two directions existing inside you at once. The conscious path, built from history, duty, and recognition, and the deeper path, forming through energy, image, grief, and truth. Confusion is what transition feels like, when the old map remains visible, but no longer describes the terrain. Your task is not to force the next chapter open. It is to stop sealing every door through which it is already trying to reach you. The unconscious does not reveal your future by giving you certainty. It reveals your future by changing what you can no longer pretend is alive. When you listen to that change without worshiping it, dismissing it, or rushing it, the next chapter begins before any external decision is made. If this resonates, subscribe to The Waking Shadow, where we explore Carl Jung's psychology for those walking the individuation path. Watch the video on your screen now to understand why your old identity may be resisting the life that is trying to emerge.